Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Ninja in Jujutsu Kaisen. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name in the description below. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 151, Sumiki in Danger. Facing Yuram's doubts, Kenjaku didn't care at all. Instead, he stretched out 5 fingers and smiled with narrowed eyes. The ancient sorcerer regarded as a veteran, Dhruv Lakdawala. The ancient sorcerer whose cursed energy output exceeds that of even Okatsu Yuta, Ryu Ishigori. Takako Yuro who controls the sky. Kuroroshi who claims to be immortal. And the strongest from 400 years ago, Hajime Kashimo. Any one of these 5 superpowers can destroy the entirety of Japan. Isn't that exciting enough? Kenjaku called out the names of these 5 strong men in one breath. However, Yuram was dismissive and said, "Heh, what's the difference between the first 4 and ordinary trash in Sukuna-sama's eyes?" As for the battle fanatic Kashimo from 400 years ago, he is indeed strong, but he's still not as good as Sukuna-sama. Yuram's sharp words belittled these 5 strong men, making them seem worthless. As expected of Sukuna's subordinate, you have a big appetite. Kenjaku smiled, stretching his 5 fingers and looking up at the sky through the gaps between them. What if I told you this culling game could restore your Sukuna-sama to his peak strength or maybe even make him stronger? This finally piqued Yuram's curiosity. She raised an eyebrow slightly, and though her tone remained indifferent, it couldn't hide the turmoil in her heart. Go beyond his limits? You better not be joking. Kenjaku glanced at her sideways. He looked down on this foolish woman, whose devotion to Sukuna had reshaped her very being. Kenjaku asked, "Have you ever heard of Maharaga?" Yuram's breath hitched. She had lived for thousands of years, how could she not know that name? The ultimate Shikigami of the 10 Shadows technique. Possessing a monstrous adaptability, it is said to be the nemesis of all sorcerers. Since the Zenin clan's founding, no one had ever completely subdued Maharaga. If Sukuna could tame it and reproduce such an incredible ability, Kazuma and Gojo wouldn't stand a chance against him. Yuram said, "If that's the case, I'll admit this culling game is somewhat interesting. So what's the plan?" Yuram's proud words fell on Kenjaku's ears, and he smiled slightly. "Come with me." Soon, under Kenjaku's guidance, the two arrived at a dimly lit room. Yuram asked, "What does Maharaga have to do with this woman?" Looking at the girl lying on the bed with her eyes closed, Yuram frowned. Kenjaku replied, "Her name is Tsumiki, and she is Megumi's sister." At that moment, Yuram instantly grasped Kenjaku's intention. At the same time, she couldn't help but sneer at the despicable nature of this monster. Megumi had inherited the 10 Shadows technique. Now that his sister has disappeared, he must be extremely anxious. It would take only a single piece of information to lure him into their trap. As Kenjaku whispered an obscure curse technique, the black curse on Tsumiki's forehead gradually faded. The one who ties the bell must untie it. At this moment, Tsumiki, who had been sleeping due to the curse, slowly opened her eyes. "Ugh, my head hurts." "Ha? Who are you?" Tsumiki stared warily at the 2 figures in the room. The 2 thick quilts covering her couldn't provide any sense of security. Moreover, the unfamiliar room's decor made her immediately realize that this wasn't her home. Was this a dream or reality? Just as the girl began to panic, an extremely gentle voice sounded in her ears. This is the gap between dreams and reality. The outside world is in chaos. We are here to protect you. Perhaps it was the gentleness of Kenjaku's voice, eerily similar to Geto Sugiru's, or perhaps he was using some kind of witchcraft to bewitch her. Either way, Tsumiki subconsciously let down her guard. Slowly, she began to believe the man in front of her. Her limbs were still stiff, making it difficult to sit up. She followed behind Kenjaku and Yuram, carefully stepping into the ink-black night. Tsumiki's mind was blank. She looked at the 2 figures in front of her, about to ask something when suddenly, a blinding light filled her vision. The pungent scent of blood assaulted her senses, and in the blink of an eye, she saw it. Collapsed buildings, shattered bridges, cars torn in half by unseen forces, broken limbs and bodies strewn across the ground. The overwhelming stench of iron and death. Hell on earth. The extremely bloody and horrifying scene almost made Tsumiki's heart stop. She had been skeptical before, but now she was utterly convinced. The world had ended. Yuram's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. If you want to kill Kazuma, why did you create a rule preventing him from participating? Kenjaku chuckled, then summoned a tiny golden insect from his body. He said, I have to put on a good show. Rules are meant to be broken. The sorcerers at Jujutsu High will try their best to get the points. And once Kashimo and the others, who have signed contracts with me, unconditionally transfer their points, I can use an overwhelming amount of points to add a rule that specifically targets him. At this, Kenjaku's smile became deeply sinister. How about this? If he doesn't rank first in points, all his curse techniques will be stripped away. Kazuma is powerful, but I want him to die under the weight of this game's rules. Kenjaku spread his arms wide, inhaling the thick scent of blood. He didn't just enjoy war, it was merely the prelude to humanity's next evolution. Everyone assumed Kazuma was too strong to be allowed to participate in the culling game. They were wrong. The rule restricting him was nothing more than a smokescreen to mislead the higher-ups and Kazuma himself. If he dares to enter, he will never leave. Just imagining a warrior of Kazuma's caliber perishing under his schemes filled Kenjaku with pure ecstasy. By then, he would have the perfect body. After several battles, Kenjaku had become obsessed with Kazuma's body. That inexplicable, overwhelming cursed technique. The seemingly limitless supply of cursed energy. And, most importantly, the genjutsu capable of countering even Sukuna. As everyone knew, most cursed techniques are imprinted into a sorcerer's body from birth. Yet Kazuma possessed a vast array of abilities, making Kenjaku burn with envy. Only Gojo, with his 6 eyes and limitless, could rival such an anomaly. Compared to Kazuma, Geto's body was worthless. Kenjaku ran his long, pointed tongue across the corner of his lips, grinning madly. He said, I'll dig out his brain, keep those 2 fascinating eyes, and find myself a new home. Yuram stared at Kenjaku with a deep gaze. This man spoke with a gentle and refined demeanor, but he would do anything to achieve his goals. Anyone could become his pawn, even her. Even Sukuna-sama. The 4 disaster curses of the past were proof enough. She has to remain cautious. Otherwise, even Sukuna might fall into Kenjaku's trap. The conversation between them had not been concealed. Even if Tsumiki had been slow-witted, she would have realized it by now. Her eyes widened in horror. She took a step back, trembling, as she pointed at them. You're the ones behind this disaster? Chapter 152, Yaga's Predicament. At this moment, Tsumiki was extremely terrified. In the conversation just now, she heard the words Jujutsu High and a name called Kazuma. As Megumi's elder sister, she knew something about Jujutsu. Could these 2 people in front of her be the curse users her younger brother had mentioned? But if they wanted to deal with Jujutsu High and the sorcerer named Kazuma, why would they capture her? She had nothing to do with Jujutsu High, she was just Megumi's sister. Wait. Megumi. Thinking of this, Tsumiki's heart suddenly pounded. Could it be that they want to use her to harm Megumi? Kenjaku showed a harmless smile and said, Tsumiki-san, please cooperate with me. During this period, I will treat you like a distinguished guest. Tsumiki's face turned pale as her mood shifted. At this point, she had no choice, but she couldn't just sit and wait for death. Maybe she could learn more about their conspiracies and then find a way to spread the news. At night. A forbidden area of Jujutsu High. In a small cell sat a somewhat forlorn figure. The outbreak of the astral plasma vessel incident and Geto's dark transformation had dealt Yaga a devastating blow. During the Shibuya incident, his beloved disciple Gojo had been sealed, making him look even older. The cold cursed handcuffs weighed heavy on Yaga's heart. Without Gojo's presence to intimidate them, the higher-ups, who had long coveted his cursed corpse creation technique, finally began to act. Not long after the Shibuya incident, they sentenced him to death on trumped-up charges. He never told anyone about it. He knew their real motive and would never reveal the method of creating cursed corpses. Everything was heading toward the worst possible outcome. Outside the door, an old voice rang out. "You are not the only one who can create a cursed corpse, but no one else can make one that can think independently. Not to mention, this cursed corpse can grow like a sorcerer. It would be more accurate to call it a living sorcerer rather than a cursed corpse. Hand over the method, Yaga." At this point, Gakaganji suddenly raised his voice. "Don't tell me you really don't know how to make it?" Only one response came from inside the cell. "Yes, I don't know." Hearing this, Gakaganji sighed. "In terms of stubbornness, Gojo is nothing compared to you." In his opinion, Yaga should never have exposed Panda to the world. If he hadn't, the higher-ups wouldn't have been so jealous. As the head of two schools, Gakaganji had always resented Yaga's brilliance, but deep down, he admired him. The fact that Yaga had trained someone as powerful as Gojo proved that his teaching ability far surpassed Gakaganji's own. If Gakaganji had been a higher-up, he wouldn't have coveted the cursed corpse creation technique. Instead, he would have studied Yaga's teaching philosophy. He didn't want Yaga to die like this. But despite all his persuasion, there was no response. Gakaganji narrowed his cloudy eyes, frowning. "Something's wrong." Creak. The door swung open. Inside the narrow cell, there was nothing. Only the broken cursed handcuffs remained. Gakaganji couldn't help but smile bitterly. Yes, if you hadn't come here voluntarily, how could these handcuffs have held you? But escaping like this, you've destroyed your own path completely. In a forest. A gust of night wind blew, rustling the fallen leaves. Yaga sat alone on a wooden stump. No one knew the forbidden areas of Jujutsu High better than him. It hadn't taken much effort to escape from the heavily guarded prison. This forest, protected by Tingen's barrier, was where his companions resided. He couldn't abandon them. Before his death, this was something he had to do. Beside him, a dog wearing a tie and a black suit called out softly. "Yaga, what's wrong with you lately? You seem out of it. Everyone's worried. But I told them to find a way to cheer you up. What do you think? Am I a genius?" Clearly, this was another independent cursed corpse created by Yaga, just like Panda. It possessed human-like emotions. Yaga forced a smile, stroking the dog's head lovingly. "Takaru, I'll be away for a long time. Tell everyone not to worry." "Ha? A business trip again? How long is a long time?" Takaru's eyes widened in surprise. He looked at the man before him, the one who was like a father, with deep reluctance. Yaga didn't answer directly. His voice, filled with exhaustion, was gentle. "It's fine. This forest is under Master Tingen's protection. You'll be safe here. Even if I'm gone someday, nothing will happen to you." As he gazed at the dark sky, Yaga's heart ached. He spoke words of farewell in a calm tone. But his actions betrayed his true emotions. After hesitating for a long time, he couldn't help but open the hut where his creations lived. At the foot of a treehouse, a miniature wooden door creaked open, revealing a hidden world. The cursed corpses he had painstakingly created filled his view. They were small and varied in shape, but to Yaga, they were irreplaceable treasures. "It's okay, Father. We'll always be here, waiting for you, even if it's forever." The speaker was a dog-like cursed creature, its big eyes brimming with tears. From the conversation earlier, it had vaguely understood the true meaning of Yaga's words. "Come on, Takaru. I have some free time today. I'll take you to meet your biological mother." Meanwhile, at Jujutsu High, a restricted chamber stood sealed. Bang! 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 Inside, Panda slammed his body against the walls with a ferocious expression. He had already sensed that something was wrong. He wanted to find Yaga, but the higher-ups had imprisoned him. Something must have happened to Yaga. Just then, the stone door creaked open, and a blade flashed. Panda stood still, staring at the broken iron chains in his hands. His eyes flickered with confusion as he looked up. "Kuzukabe, what are you doing?" Kuzukabe held a half-smoked cigarette in his mouth and slowly sheathed his sword. "The higher-ups locked you up so you wouldn't rescue Yaga. Yaga once did me a favor. This is just me repaying my debt. That's the basic principle of being human. He was a human being with a conscience first, and a sorcerer second. Years ago, after his nephew had died unexpectedly, his sister, the boy's mother, was devastated by grief. Unable to bear her pain, Kuzukabe turned to Yaga. That cursed corpse was Takaru. Chapter 153, A Family Reunion. Soon after, in the forest shrouded by Tingen's barrier, several figures met, and Kuzukabe slowly moved forward, pushing his sister in a wheelchair. "Is that person my mother?" Takaru, who was hiding behind Yaga, timidly showed one eye. Yaga looked at the haggard-looking woman sitting in a wheelchair in front of him, smiled, and nodded. Takaru, who had received the affirmation, walked out from behind Yaga happily and said his catchphrase proudly. "So, I recognized my mother at first sight. Am I a genius?" After hearing these words, the girl, who originally had dull eyes, suddenly brightened up. There was no mistake. This unique tone and catchphrase was often on her son's lips. The image of her deceased child suddenly appeared in her mind. She suddenly stood up from the wheelchair, staggered towards Takaru, and burst into tears. Looking at the woman who had revived, Yaga smiled with relief. He did not disturb the reunion of mother and son but went alone to die. "Wait." Kuzukabe stopped Yaga and said, "You gave my sister hope to survive. I can help you escape." Yaga said, "No need. I don't want to ruin your stable job. Just live a good life with your sister. See you later." Yaga waved his hand casually, and his lonely black figure became smaller and smaller in everyone's sight, finally disappearing into the twilight. Looking at the figure disappearing from his sight, Kuzukabe murmured, "See you later. How can we meet again after this separation? Hopefully, Panda can catch up." Meanwhile, at Jujutsu High, as Yaga returned alone to the place he was all too familiar with, several figures stood on the streetlights along the way. They were executioners sent by the higher-ups, about a dozen of them. The masked killer in the lead spoke coldly, "Knowing that you will die, you still returned without even taking a single cursed corpse with you? Without the cursed corpses, you can't be called the almighty Principal Yaga. Hand over the method to create cursed corpses like Panda, or you will die." The killers all had the strength of a first-grade sorcerer. And the masked leader in the middle was even harder to gauge. Although not as strong as Meimei or Nanami, this lineup was enough to kill anyone below special grade. However, facing the killers looking down at him, Yaga's expression did not change at all. He slowly took off his shirt, revealing his muscular body. "Ha, now that Gojo is gone, you all are getting arrogant? Well, it's been a while since I've had a real fight. Let's see how the first-grade sorcerers working for the higher-ups compare to my students." At that moment, an old and familiar voice rang out. "There's no need to compare. They are naturally no match for your students." During the conversation, a ghostly hunched figure suddenly appeared in front of Yaga. Gakaganji held an electric guitar in his hand, his cloudy eyes staring at Yaga. Yaga was stunned for a moment, then shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Ha! I didn't expect it to be you who would execute me in the end. Old friend, we fought for most of our lives, it seems you will have the last laugh." The moment he saw Gakaganji, Yaga gave up resistance. Although Gakaganji had always worked for the higher-ups, he was a good principal, and Kyoto Jujutsu High couldn't do without him. However, Yaga's surrender did not make Gakaganji happy, it made him furious. Bang! A sudden force struck from the electric guitar. The defenseless Yaga was instantly knocked away, slamming into the wall behind him. Watching Gakaganji approach in an instant, he covered his chest and joked. "Ha! Not bad. You're old, but your legs and feet are still quite nimble. You must take a lot of calcium, huh?" Gakagenji's tone was heavy. Tell me the method of cursed corpse creation. You shouldn't die like this. Yaga, however, simply glanced at the guitar in Gakagenji's hands and muttered to himself. Play a song. Play your best music for me, a dying man, as a farewell. In the twilight, geese flapped their wings under the streetlights, flying toward the burning bulbs. They yearned for light, and even though they knew it was fire, they still rushed forward on a path of no return. Yaga was like a flying goose, placing all his life's efforts into cursed corpses. But unlike the geese, he knowingly rushed into the fire, unable to let go of his final worries. Two old friends who understood each other well were saying their last farewell, yet their topics were completely different. Suddenly, Yaga's weak voice reached Gakagenji's ears. Copy all the information from the body to the soul, then record it into cursed energy core. Then, place the cursed energy core that matches the characteristics of the soul in the body of the cursed corpse. As for the key points of cursed corpse production. The shocking words that entered his ears made Gakagenji's eyes widen. The electric guitar in his hands nearly slipped to the ground. At the very last moment, Yaga had gone mad, revealing the entire method of cursed corpse creation. He had given it all to this old friend, his lifelong rival. Why didn't you say it earlier? You could have avoided death. Gakagenji grabbed Yaga's collar angrily, confused. As soon as Yaga had escaped from the cell, the higher-ups had issued their final order. Regardless of whether Yaga revealed the method or not, he was to be executed without mercy. Ha! Yaga smiled indifferently. This is a curse, old man. My curse on you. As he looked at the high-ranking assassins waiting behind Gakagenji, Yaga finally relaxed. Go ahead. It's better to die by your hands. Just as he spoke, an extremely angry voice erupted behind them. Yaga! A furious roar resounded through the air, drawing the attention of all the assassins. The killers surrounded them, blocking all of Yaga's escape routes. As Panda appeared, Gakagenji instinctively raised his guitar in defense. But the expected violent retaliation never came. Instead, Panda brushed past him and anxiously checked Yaga's injuries. A puzzled voice came from behind him. Why don't you attack me? I'm the one who's going to kill your father. Clearly, Gakagenji had underestimated Panda's intelligence. This cursed corpse, created by Yaga, had a heart larger than any human. Ha! I'm different from you humans. I can feel the bond between you and Yaga. You're nothing more than a weapon of the higher-ups, a poor soul with no choice. So you're not the one I should hate. The real enemies are those rotten old men. But remember, Gakagenji. Pandas can cry too. A furious howl shook Jujutsu High. Panda wanted vengeance for his father. Just then, an assassin lost patience and said, Captain, the principal of Kyoto Jujutsu High is too slow. Let us finish it. The masked leader nodded. Amaterasu. At this moment, a familiar voice rang out. Instantly, black flames consumed the assassins. Screams echoed as their bodies burned. Yaga, Panda, and Gakagenji were all stunned. The leader pulled down his mask, revealing a familiar face. Their eyes widened as they gasped. Kazuma? Chapter 154, Saving Yaga. When did you become a killer? Yaga stood up with difficulty, covering the wound on his chest, and looked at Kazuma in surprise. No wonder he had vaguely sensed something was wrong from the previous conversation, but couldn't tell why. But in the final analysis, this kid's acting skills are too realistic, making it impossible for him to doubt him. Panda, who was just about to start a killing spree, was also confused by this sudden situation. The anger in his heart was now completely replaced by doubts. No one could have imagined that among the assassins sent by the top brass to kill Yaga, there would be Kazuma. And he's in the leader position? Gakagenji stared at Kazuma with deep eyes. Although these killers were not very strong, they had all reached the level of first-grade sorcerers. Kazuma actually killed everyone in such a short time. The most terrifying thing is, when did he sneak in? he didn't even notice it. Kazuma walked in front of the three people, glanced at Gakaganji lightly, and smiled casually. The top brass are just there to do nothing, so these so-called assassins are naturally not that strong. You didn't have any vigilance at all, so I got in easily. Long before, after reaching an agreement with Gojo, Kazuma had begun to look for Yaga's traces. But although he was a high-level sorcerer, he did not know where the forbidden area was. Without the specific coordinates, he could only rely on his Kamui to teleport. After narrowing down the search area through trial and error, he happened to encounter an assassination team. Then, while saying hello, he used a simple genjutsu to easily control everyone. As for the body of the real leader, he was sleeping in the Kamui dimension. Upon hearing this, Gakaganji's mouth twitched. These assassins are weak? These assassins are all elite troops affiliated with the higher-ups, and they take orders directly from them. Their strength is beyond doubt, but to Kazuma, they... Well, now you can't die even if you want to. We are all accomplices. Kazuma looked at Yaga and smiled evilly. Hearing this, Yaga was both moved and speechless. Kazuma was right. Now he and Panda had become accomplices. Even Gakaganji is likely to be held accountable by higher-ups. Even if these people did not die at his hands, they don't care. Everyone died, leaving only Gakaganji to go back? Will the higher-ups believe it? Panda said, "Humph, so what if I am an accomplice?" From the moment the higher-ups dared to attack Yaga, I, Panda, have decided to never reconcile with them. Kazuma, let's go raid their headquarters tonight, since we've already completely torn our relationship apart. Panda clenched his fists, and the anger in his eyes did not dissipate. Night raid? You bastard! Why are you walking to your own demise? Do you think you are Kazuma? As soon as Panda finished speaking, he was slapped hard on the head. After the slap, Panda became completely obedient, looking at Yaga with a face full of grievance. Seeing it like this, Yaga rubbed the panda's head inside. Kazuma, I'm sure you're confused as to why I didn't create an army of cursed corpses to kill all the higher-ups, or ask Gojo to replace them directly? In addition to the complex web of relationships involved, there is another point. I used to think that although those old guys were pedantic and stubborn, from the perspective of radicals, they were understandable in some ways. For example, sentencing Yuji to death from the beginning to prevent future troubles? But it doesn't matter anymore. Ever since they issued the order to forbid everyone from removing the seal on Gojo, I completely lost the last bit of hope in them. These people are far more greedy than the cursed spirits. They are like a basket of rotten oranges that are beyond repair. So, kill them. Kill as many as you can. I will not stop you. Such rulers are like dark clouds covering the sky. Under their rule, the world of Jujutsu will never see the light of day. Yaga's words made the three people present surprised. How could Yaga actually say such a thing? Kazuma pondered for a moment and grinned. Isn't it a pity to kill them like this? The three felt a chill down their spine when they saw Kazuma's weird smile. Could it be that Kazuma has other methods? Kazuma continued, I'm sure you all know the rules of the culling game. If you have 100 points, you can make a rule. These pedantic high-ranking officials are all sorcerers, right? If they enter the culling game, no one will know their identities. If I accidentally kill them as a curse user, no one will know, right? Now, in Kazuma's eyes, these high-level officials were no different from walking humanoids. Since they're going to die anyway, why not throw them into the culling game to earn points? Even with the help of Jogo and the other, securing first place is still not foolproof enough. After all, it is not easy to find the location of the curse users who have signed a contract with Choso. Although innocent ordinary people can provide points, he certainly cannot kill indiscriminately just for points. If so, how will he be any different from Sukuna? So, let the evil higher-ups make contributions, he. As soon as these words came out, the three people nearby couldn't help but take a deep breath. Kazuma's intention was clear, to force the higher-ups into the death spree. Yaga was frightened and said, that Kazuma, you don't really think of yourself as a curse user, do you? Panda echoed, this method is simply perfect. But one thing I must say is that, Kazuma, you actually have a talent for being a curse user. Kazuma knew that the two were joking, so he looked to the side, at Gakagenji, which remained silent. Boom! His scarlet pupils glowed with an eerie light. A terrifying sense of oppression spread out instantly, and the ground beneath his feet suddenly cracked. Gakagenji, who was targeted by the aura, seemed to be completely stagnant, and even breathing became a luxury. This kind of suffocatingly powerful and terrifying pressure was comparable to Gojo and Sukuna. The three people nearby were frightened. It was not until this moment that they truly realized the horror of Kazuma. This seemingly harmless and approachable man almost made them forget the terrifying power he possessed. Yaga hesitated for a moment, but still persuaded, Kazuma, Gakagenji is different from the higher-ups. Kazuma said indifferently, old man, you should be thankful that you showed mercy to Yaga before. You should remember how to make the cursed corpses, right? Don't hang out with the higher-ups anymore. Teach the students well, and help Yaga when making the cursed corpses. Understand? Looking at Gakagenji, whose face was gradually turning pale, Kazuma withdrew his aura. Gakagenji was hunched over, and his old face seemed to be relieved. He was well aware of the corruption among the higher-ups, but decades of restraint in his thinking prevented him from taking that step. Over the years, even if he was dissatisfied, his restrained thoughts made him unwilling to think too much, and he almost instinctively followed the orders of the top. If Kazuma really killed all the higher-ups, it might be a long-awaited relief for him. He glanced at the electric guitar in his hand and said to Yaga, your curse is still in effect. I hope that after my death, I can be made into a cursed corpse like Panda, and continue to teach students, as atonement. Then you have to beg me. Yaga smiled for the first time in a long time and replied, then looked at Kazuma. Now that things have come to this, the higher-ups will not take any action in the short term. What are your plans? Chapter 155, Maki enters the Zenin clan. What are his plans? Anyway, the others haven't collected 100 points yet, so he can't participate in the culling game. Thinking of this, Kazuma looked at the three people and smiled slightly. He said, how about coming with me to the Zenin clan to watch the fun? If you miss this chance, you won't have another one. His words left Yaga and Gakagenji confused. Watching the fun? Why go to the Zenin clan's house to watch the fun for no reason? And if they miss this chance, it won't come again? Panda suddenly realized something, and his round body shook violently. He said, you mean, Maki? He had heard about Maki going to the Zenin clan alone to borrow cursed tools. There's still no news. Could it be that a fight has broken out? The little girl from the Zenin clan? Gakagenji muttered to himself, if I remember correctly, she's just a 4th grade sorcerer who can't even see cursed spirits, right? The only 4th grade sorcerer at Jujutsu High. According to the Zenin clan's tradition, Maki doesn't seem to be well received. If there's a dispute, it's likely bad news. In his impression, this woman, born without cursed energy, had a sense of pride deep within her. Her tenacity to endure hardships better than anyone else made her stand out, but there were huge constraints like natural barriers. She hadn't demonstrated any exceptional performance, so over time he had stopped paying attention to her. Yaga frowned and said, what nonsense! How could the Zenin clan lend the cursed tools to her if she goes there alone? Compared to Gakagenji, Yaga knew more about Maki's situation in the Zenin clan. Being able to walk out of the Zenin clan's gates amid everyone's sneers and ridicule is the best outcome. Will the Zenin clan really lend her cursed tools? Kazuma raised his eyebrows slightly and said, no, you are all wrong. It's not Maki you should be worried about. Rather, it's the entire Zenin clan. The three people nearby showed disbelief on their faces. Yaga said, ahem, Kazuma, I know that Maki's strength has improved under your guidance. But isn't it a bit too much to say that she can fight against the entire Zenin clan by herself? Only a special grade sorcerer can do so, even Mei Mei and Nanami can't do this. Let's go quickly. Maki is my student after all. I can't just stand by and watch her die. Gakagenji stroked his sparse beard and said, I think so too. Kazuma said, "It seems that Maki has been underestimated by you guys." Even without his help, in the original story, Maki could carve her way through the entire Zenin clan on her own. But the price she paid was incredibly high. She was first forced into a desperate situation by her father. Then, she used the soul-splitting katana made by her sister Mai at the cost of her life, combined with her awakened heavenly restriction, to break through the Zenin clan. But now, with the 8 inner gates, a physical technique that seemed tailor-made for her, the process would probably be much easier. With the 8 inner gates and her heavenly restriction, Kazuma couldn't imagine how strong Maki would be in the future. It is only a matter of time before she surpasses Toji. He couldn't wait to see Naoya's broken expression. After being pressed to the ground and rubbed by someone he had always looked down upon, would Naoya be so furious that he'd vomit blood? Kazuma looked at the three with a slight smile on his face and said, "Since you all don't believe me, let's wait and see." Yaga rubbed his hands and said in a deep voice, "Let's go, I can't watch my student being bullied." Panda mimicked Yaga's movements and snorted coldly, "Humph. I'll let the Zenin clan see what Kung Fu Panda can do." Zenin clan. The towering gate was tightly closed, and the magnificent stone walls exuded a majestic atmosphere. This is the Zenin clan, one of the big 3 sorcerer clans that has been passed down for thousands of years. However, the Zenin clan members, who always prided themselves on their arrogance, had no idea that a disaster that would wipe out their clan was about to fall upon them. Outside the door, Maki stood in front, motionless. Even though her forehead was covered by short hair, her determined gaze could not be concealed. Looking at this family that had brought countless shadows to her childhood, she took a deep breath and then slowly opened the gate of the Zenin clan. However, as soon as she stepped inside, an extremely harsh voice reached her ears. "Hey, who's that? It turns out it's Maki, born without cursed energy. How did you become like this? Short hair doesn't suit you. Were you kicked out of Jujutsu High for being too weak? That's fine. The Zenin clan needs servants. Why don't you call your equally useless sister alone? Ha ha ha." At this point, Naoya suddenly burst into laughter, and the tears in the corners of his eyes almost squeezed out. At this moment, he seemed to want to vent all the pain he had suffered a few days ago on Maki. That bastard Kazuma actually said he would leave his life for Maki to deal with personally? At first, he was skeptical and thought Maki had become someone extraordinary. But now, it seems there has been almost no change. Still the useless person born without any cursed energy, thinking that cutting her hair short would fool him? Trash is always trash. Faced with Naoya's ridicule, Maki simply treated it as the barking of a stray dog on the roadside. Whenever she spoke one more word to him, she felt extremely disgusted. She glanced at Naoya calmly, took a big step, and headed towards the armory. Now is not the time for revenge. Once she gets a weapon, it won't be too late. Moreover, her sister Mai had heard from somewhere that Maki was going to the Zenin clan to borrow weapons and had returned home ahead of time. It's still unclear what the situation is now. TSK. Trash. Seeing that Maki ignored him, Naoya left after a few words. He flicked his sleeves and turned away. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that no good news was coming from Maki's return to the Zenin clan this time. But due to the rules, he couldn't punish the arrogant Maki without any reason. Along the way, Maki heard nothing but mocking voices. Words like trash and jinx were hurled mercilessly from the mouths of the Zenin clansmen. Disdain from elders and vicious words from peers. This pedantic clan, whenever something bad happens, subconsciously blames the Maki sisters even if it has nothing to do with them. In the subconsciousness of everyone in this clan, the two sisters are synonymous with bad luck. The Zenin clan is beyond help. This was Maki's most intuitive feeling along the way. Just before she arrived at the forbidden storehouse, a familiar woman shouted, "Go back. Women are not allowed to enter the forbidden storehouse in the Zenin clan. Have you forgotten this rule?" The woman decisively stopped her daughter from transgressing. Looking at her mother, who was very familiar and yet so strange, Maki's expression fluctuated slightly. She shook the key to the forbidden vault in her hand and said indifferently, "This is the key I obtained from Megumi. you have no right to stop me. However, Maki's answer didn't work, and what came out instead was her mother's angry rebuke. Go back. You have disobeyed your elders, run away from home, and forcibly entered the forbidden warehouse. I will punish you with 10 days of solitary confinement. However, for the first time, these majestic words failed to scare Maki. Her mother, who always swallowed her anger when faced with provocations from others, was completely opposite to her. From childhood to adulthood, it seemed that she and her sister were used as punching bags. Undisguised murderous intent flashed from Maki's eyes like a cold ray of light. Wherever she went, those from the Zenin clan who had mocked her before felt a chill down their spines. Everyone immediately shut up their endless chatter. Maki's cold eyes were like a bloodthirsty beast. Everyone vaguely believed that if they dared to say one more word, it would probably face a miserable death. Maki's mother also opened her eyes wide, looking at her daughter in disbelief, as if she had been reborn. The scolding words were stuck in her throat. The scene was completely silent, except for the nervous beating of hearts and the rapid breathing. Maki turned away disdainfully and opened the door of the forbidden vault without hesitation. The falling chain reflected Maki's stern face. Passing through the dark corridor, countless powerful curse tools appeared in her view. However, the next second, Maki suddenly froze in place. The spacious armory was empty. An extremely terrifying figure was sitting on the ground, staring at Maki with cold eyes. You've grown wings, Maki. Cold and emotionless words came out of Oji's mouth. However, Maki ignored it and looked toward the corner of the wall in the distance. There, an unconscious girl was lying, with blood oozing from the corner of her mouth. What did you do to my sister? Maki clenched her fists and stared at her father, Zen and Oji. Oji said, nothing, I just wanted to test her ability. I didn't expect her to be so weak that she couldn't even withstand a single blow. She even said something ridiculous like she'll never fight her father. She's still the same weakling with the mentality of a child and hasn't made any progress at all. Hearing this, Maki took a deep breath and suppressed the rage in her heart. She said indifferently, Father, I don't want to kill you. Chapter 156, Father vs. Daughter. When Maki said this, Oji sitting opposite suddenly burst out with a deep murderous intent. When learning that Megumi had become the head of the Zenin clan, Naoya was not the only one who was angry. As a candidate, he also couldn't accept it. There is a way to kill Megumi, but there must be a reason to do so. That is to use one of the high-level penalty orders. Anyone who tries to remove the seal on Gojo will be punished with death. And Maki's behavior of coming to borrow cursed tools this time is obvious. In this case, let's start with this useless daughter who has brought shame to him for more than 10 years. Everything that happens today will be watched by clan members and high-level informants. By then, his performance will definitely be supported by a large number of people, and even the higher-ups will stand on his side. The balance of the position of the head of the clan will tilt towards him. Oji stood up and slowly drew out the long sword hidden at his waist. As the scabbard fell to the ground, the extremely sharp blade reflected a dazzling cold light. Maki, if you try to break the seal on the prison realm, I will sentence you to death on behalf of the higher-ups. As the emotionless words came out of the mouth of her biological father, Mai, who was unconscious in the back, suddenly woke up. Sister, hurry up. He has had this plan for a long time. Maki said nothing, but silently took out the long sword from her waist. This is the cursed tool she had borrowed from Jujutsu High, Dragon Bone. This is a special grade cursed tool that can convert attack power into the blade for counterattack. She first smiled at her sister, then looked at Oji as if she were looking at a dead person. This has never been stained with blood since it was made. Today, I'll let you, a beast who can even kill their own flesh and blood, baptize it. The two ruthless people didn't say any more extra words, and two figures approached quickly. As a clanging sound rang out in the space, the battle of life and death officially began. Outside the forbidden warehouse. Inside the courtyard. Suddenly, a vortex appeared out of nowhere. 3 people and a panda slowly walked out of the whirlpool. Several people bypassed the gate without any pressure and appeared here. Kazuma, are you sure Maki is in this area? Kazuma nodded and said, yes. I have left a mark on her body, there will be no mistakes. During the brief conversation, the gate of the forbidden warehouse in front of them suddenly exploded. With a loud bang, a figure flew out backwards. Maki held Dragon Bone in her right hand across his chest, and held her tearful sister Mai in her left hand. At this moment, her arms were covered with marks and bleeding. But the wound was quickly healed by the red steam emanating from her body. It seems opening the gate of life is no longer a big pressure for you. When a familiar voice came, Maki was stunned and turned back suddenly. Kazuma! And, two principals, and Panda? Why are you here? Kazuma smiled and said, do you need help? As soon as this was said, Yaga responded immediately, is that even a question? Of course I'll help. Didn't you see it was Maki who was blown away? And the Zenin clan will probably arrive soon. In response, Panda and Gakaganji nodded in unison, and also agreed very much with Yaga's words. Although they don't know who the opponent in the Forbidden Warehouse is, it is better to end the battle as soon as possible. Otherwise, once they are surrounded by the Zenin clan, they won't be able to leave even if they want to. However, at this moment, Maki's firm words suddenly came out. No need for help, I want to kill that beast myself. Also, the two principals, I may disappoint you today. What do you want to do? Yaga had a bad feeling. Maki slowly opened her mouth and uttered indifferently, patricide. Boom! The extremely shocking words fell on the minds of the people like a bolt from the blue. Except for Kazuma, who already knew about it, the other three all stared with their eyes wide open and stood there in a daze. Patricide, patricide? This means that the enemy she is facing is Zenin Oji. What happened? Most importantly, if Maki really does this, she will be besieged and killed by the entire Zenin clan. However, the sudden terrifying murderous intent coming from the front made it impossible for them to think any further. They saw Oji, holding a long sword, walking towards this side step by step. You really disappoint me. I wanted to praise you for your progress, but you called for help instead? Facing Oji's ridicule, Maki's expression remained unchanged. She handed her sister to Kazuma and went forward alone. I am enough to kill you. Mai, who was already crying in Kazuma's arms, struggled frantically and reached out to help her sister. Being a thoughtful woman, she had already anticipated that this day would come. Seeing that she couldn't break free, she actually began to make seals with her hands and use her cursed technique. Kazuma patted her shoulder helplessly and said, don't be impulsive, your sister will win. She is no longer the same as before. He knew about Mai's curse technique. In the original story, she had used her life to create a weapon that was comparable to a divine weapon, a replica of the soul-splitting katana. However, Mai was still extremely worried, mumbling to herself with a sob. It's useless, the reason she is like this is because of me. As long as I am alive, Maki will always be a half-baked person who can't accomplish anything. Growing up, she was completely different from her sister Maki. As the older sister, Maki has been strong all her life, but she does not have any lofty ideals. She doesn't want to become stronger, or even become a sorcerer. Not to mention something as meaningless as the position of the head of the clan. She just wants to be an ordinary girl and enjoy the peace and quiet. Therefore, her sister's stubbornness forced her to join Jujutsu High, and conflicts arose between the two. It was at this moment that Kazuma's words completely stunned her. Do you think she doesn't know about the so-called twin bondage? Watch, we will soon witness a new Toji. The so-called twin constraints do have an impact, but the shackles brought by the Zenin clan play a bigger role in the sisters' limited growth. Mai, who had regained consciousness, was shocked. So, my sister has always known about the twin constraints. After knowing the truth, she finally realized how stupid everything she had done in the past few years was. Not only has she never called Maki sister again, she has even verbally provoked her many times. It turns out that she has shouldered so much alone. Fortunately, their relationship has eased after the last sister exchange event, otherwise she would have made even more mistakes. Hearing this, several people raised their eyes and looked at the two figures fighting in front of them. Maki went from being at a disadvantage and barely parrying and blocking at the beginning to being able to handle it calmly now, which surprised everyone present. The shadow of her father that had almost shrouded her entire childhood was torn apart one by Maki's own hands. The invisible shackles that locked her forward gradually loosened. When Oji dies, the second Toji will awaken. Yaga and Gakkiganji stared at the confrontation between the two intently. At this moment, Maki was showing a scene they had never seen before. That extremely decisive attack, and that almost overflowing fighting talent. Facing Oji, she was not at all inferior, and even showed signs of suppressing Oji. Is this still Maki? Panda opened his mouth in shock, staring at the battle ahead in disbelief. In Jujutsu High, Maki, the tireless fighting woman, would drag him to practice every day. Although he was almost always the only one beaten in the physical battle, it wasn't that outrageous, right? At the speed of her sword swinging, he could only barely catch a glimpse of her afterimage, and her sword swinging speed was still increasing. Oji's body was beginning to show cuts of varying depths. Chapter 157, Fully Awakening the Heavenly Restriction. The three of them were completely stunned as they watched Maki grow stronger visibly. Panda was both happy and sad. He asked, "Why is she so stubborn? We were just good sparring partners before. But now, like magic, Maki has instantly become several times stronger. If I didn't know her well, I would have suspected that she had been hiding her strength all these years. I'm afraid I won't be qualified to be her sparring partner anymore." Thinking of this, Panda suddenly looked at Kazuma and asked, "Kazuma, are you sure you're not secretly helping Maki? Otherwise, how could she become so powerful all of a sudden?" As soon as these words were spoken, Yaga and Gakkiganji also looked at Kazuma with their eyes wide open. Kazuma raised his eyebrows slightly, pretending to think. No. How could I deliberately favor Maki just because she has long legs? Am I that kind of person? The three twitched their lips. They had finally found the reason. Panda pretended to be pitiful and said weakly, "As a teacher, you should treat everyone equally." Kazuma replied, "Next time for sure." Panda pouted and complained in a voice that only he could hear. "I don't believe you." Clang! A sound echoed throughout the entire Zenin clan. The friction caused sparks to fly all over the sky, attracting the attention of several people. The strong impact force caused Oji to fly backward uncontrollably. Oji managed to stop himself and stared at Maki, who was walking toward him with dragon bone in hand, with a shocked expression. How did she suddenly become so strong? Whether it was speed or strength, they had increased visibly during the fight. Oji, who was getting more and more frightened as he fought, now felt a little regretful. The daughter whom he had regarded as a disgrace for more than 10 years actually showed an unparalleled talent? Could it be that he hadn't discovered Maki's talent before? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The ridiculous pride in his heart made Oji suddenly shake his head like crazy. "You are the rebellious girl who brought shame to me. I will." However, before he could finish his words, a whisper like a demon from hell sounded in his ears. "Gate of pain, open." Boom! An extremely hot wave erupted from around Maki. The overwhelming wind wave made Oji's robes rustle, and even the sword in his hand almost fell off. Maki's extremely calm eyes stared at him, making him feel frightened. This feeling, this fear that was engraved in his bones made his legs tremble. There is no doubt about it, only that man could give him this kind of invisible sense of oppression. At this moment, Oji's hands and feet were already trembling, and his mental state that he thought was solid was shaking wildly. However, Maki's last words were the last straw that broke him. "So you are afraid too, father?" This short sentence made Oji's eyes widen. "How dare you? You ignorant and rebellious girl, I will." Before he could finish his words, the blade flashed through the air at a speed that could not be captured by the naked eye. Maki's figure flashed behind him like a ghost. Tick, tick. Blood flowed down the downward blade, dripping rhythmically onto the broken ground. Oji stood still, his eyes wide open and filled with fear. A line of blood oozed out from the forehead to the ear. "Rebellious daughter? Are you worthy of being my father? As the cold words fell, half of Oji's head slid to the ground. Thump! After shaking for a while, half of the corpse fell to the ground weakly. And at this moment, a crisp explosion suddenly came from Maki's body. The shackles that had bound her for more than 10 years were broken at this moment. The vengeful spirit that was trampled under the feet of her family had completely awakened. A human weapon that bears the will of her sister was born. Boom! A strong murderous aura rose up into the sky, and Maki's aura underwent a qualitative transformation at this moment. The second coming of Toji had completely awakened. The experience of being reborn made her unconsciously clench her fists, and every cell in her body was cheering and boiling. Feeling the unprecedented power, Maki glanced at the people watching the battle in the distance. The extremely sharp gaze made Panda and others feel cold in their backs, even though it was just a casual glance from Maki without any murderous intent. Maki said, "Sister, let's get started. Let's completely destroy this inhumane family that brought us bad memories, and kill them until not a single remnant remains." Mai's eyes were red, and the tears that had filled her eyes could no longer be stopped and poured out at this moment. Mai nodded heavily to her sister with a crying voice, "Yes." She was also excited by Maki's strength. Mai didn't expect that what Kazuma said was true. Even with the existence of twin restraint, Maki's heavenly restriction still came in full play. Maki looked at Kazuma, and her eyes, which were originally extremely sharp, suddenly became gentle. She said, "Kazuma, thank you. Please let me finish this task on my own. Just treat it as homework. I hope my performance won't disappoint you." After saying that, Maki disappeared instantly. And Yaga and the others were completely dumbfounded. So strong. This kind of pressure and speed. She's already reached the level of a special grade sorcerer, right? Kazuma was right. The one who should be worried now is the entire Zenin clan. At first, they thought Kazuma was joking, or that he had overestimated Maki's ability. But it turns out that he was actually correct. The most important thing is that from what Maki said just now, it can be confirmed that Maki's strength is inseparable from Kazuma. But even if she was given special care, it wouldn't be possible for Maki to become so powerful in such a short time, right? Awakening the heavenly restriction is fine, but what was the gate of injury that Maki shouted out earlier? Could this be another technique that Kazuma came up with? That's crazy, an assignment to massacre an entire clan? Panda's mind was restless for a long time. Suddenly he thought of something and raised his hand and said, "Before we follow, should we give Megumi a call? Tell him that his entire clan is about to be wiped out and that he should be prepared to be a clan leader with no clansmen?" On the other side. In the main hall. Nadia and Junichi, the two candidates for the head of the clan, sat opposite each other. "You should know that Maki is coming to the Forbidden Warehouse to get cursed tools, right?" Nadia took a sip of the tea he disliked and looked at the rough-looking, shaggy-haired man opposite him with a scrutinizing gaze. Junichi said, So what? I'm afraid that the benefits this time will be monopolized by Oji alone. That guy is a heartless person. He actually wants to use the life of his own flesh and blood in exchange for the support of the higher-ups." Naoya said, "Oh? Doesn't that mean Maki is almost dead now?" "I was thinking of finding an opportunity to give her some pointers, what a pity." Suddenly, the door was pushed open. A servant rushed in a panic and told the terrible news that had just happened. Maki is killing like crazy. Oji-sama died in her hands not long ago, and half of his head was cut off. She is currently facing off against the Kukuri unit at home, and I'm afraid they won't be able to hold her off for long. The bad news brought by the servant threw the entire Zenin clan into chaos. He died in Maki's hands. Nadia was so surprised that he narrowed his eyes, his expression was extremely solemn. As the head of the Hei, he was well aware Oji's strength. How could he die at the hands of that powerless loser? What happened? The other guards waiting outside the house were also shocked. How could the man who, in their eyes, had unrivaled swordsmanship die at Maki's hands? Was he stabbed in his sleep? Chapter 158, Nobuaki's Demise. No matter how unbelievable it was, Nobuaki couldn't care less. As the captain of the Kokoro unit, Nobuaki knew very well that this was a good opportunity to make a contribution. He looked at the group of team members behind him and gave orders decisively. Act immediately. When I arrive at the scene, I want to see that bastard captured. Yes. Looking at the departing team members, Nobuaki smiled sinisterly. Maki, I hope you don't die too soon. I will personally come and take off your head, so that I can leave a good impression in front of Junichi-sama. Soon, the team rushed to the scene and surrounded Maki, who was covered in blood. The moment they looked into Maki's eyes, everyone's expressions changed from disdain to solemnity. What on earth is going on with this powerless piece of trash? Those murderous eyes and the terrifying aura emanating from her. Especially the long sword in her hand that is dripping with blood. It must have taken a lot of lives, right? Maki squinted her eyes and enjoyed the bloody smell in the air. Her eyes swept coldly over everyone present. She had already engraved the appearance of these people in her mind. They were the culprits who had mocked her and her sister and brought trauma to their childhood. She slowly uttered, "Not a single one will be left." As soon as she finished speaking, Maki disappeared instantly, and the ground was crushed by the huge force. She then began the massacre. Her absurd speed and unrivaled strength left these people who once looked down upon her with no chance of resistance at all. The high-ranking team members were being slaughtered by the so-called trash. Yaga and the others who were hiding in the distance and watching the battle couldn't help but be amazed. Maki has completely transformed. Is this the power of the heavenly restriction? If I remember correctly, this should be her second time killing someone, right? But at this moment, Maki was like a reaper from hell, without any unnecessary movements. Facing so many people besieging her, she remained calm. Wherever the blade passed, blood flowed, and every cut was extremely deadly. All the attacks landed precisely on the opponent's throat. Not a single member of the Kokoro unit could survive Maki's blow. Yaga excitedly grabbed Kazuma's hand and said in a trembling voice, "Kazuma, thank you for giving our Tokyo Jujutsu High another special grade sorcerer. And this is unprecedented, a special grade with 0 cursed energy. How about after this crisis is resolved, I fire Gojo and leave the responsibility of guiding the students to you?" After these words were spoken, Panda and Gakuganji became speechless. My goodness, Gojo is still sealed inside the prison realm, and you are firing him? Kazuma shook his head and said, "Forget it. Even though Gojo looks cheerful, his job is actually the most tiring." It is not an exaggeration to say that if Kazuma agrees, he will have to work like a horse. Instead of doing that, he prefers to take it easy. Soon, within less than 10 seconds, the team of dozens of people all died. This is the result of Maki deliberately slowing down as she adapted to her new power. Just then, a leisurely voice came from the corner of the house. "Oh, Maki, I hope you don't die too soon, otherwise my credit will be." The leisurely words stopped abruptly when they were only halfway through. Because that person saw a scene that he would never forget. The person who had come was Nobuaki, who had let his team go ahead earlier. You actually. At this moment, he no longer had the leisurely and relaxed look he had just now. Looking at the hellish scene in front of him, he widened his eyes in horror. All his men are dead? There were broken limbs and arms scattered all over the ground, and lifeless headless corpses. And the woman standing in the middle was like a devil from hell. His team. A pair of eyes that looked like they had come straight from the abyss of hell frightened Nobuaki so much that his soul almost left his body. His legs went weak and he fell to his knees. His forehead covered in cold sweat told of the boundless fear in his heart at the moment. That look is so similar. Maki. Impossible, how could a useless person like you who has no cursed energy do all this? On the verge of collapse, he suddenly yelled like crazy, wishing he was dreaming. You are Nobuaki, who often mocked me when I was little, right? The cold words once again dragged him into the cruel reality. Maki grinned evilly and said, I recognize you, I remember all the people who bullied us sisters. Just when Nobuaki wanted to give up his dignity and beg for mercy. How dare you? Maki, are you trying to turn the tables? Several powerful auras surged in an instant. Maki looked indifferently at the three familiar figures that had suddenly appeared in front of her. The one who had rushed to the scene was Junichi. There was also Zenin Chojuro, and Zenin Ranta, two members of the Hei. Ha, little Maki is really amazing. She actually killed the entire team? But that's all. Chojuro suddenly put his hands together and activated a cursed technique. Two huge hands made of rock emerged from the ground and attacked Maki in the middle. In front of the huge rock hand, Maki's body seemed much smaller. It seemed that once hit, she would be squeezed into meat paste. Boom! The huge palms slammed together, swallowing Maki whole. The entire Zenin clan was shaken by this huge force, and dust rose up in the sky. Looking at Maki being swallowed by the big hand, Chojuro smiled smugly. He said, "Humph. She's still the same weakling." The people hiding in the distance couldn't help but sweat for Maki. Oh no! The strongest fighters of the Zenin clan are all here. They are all top-notch experts even among first-grade sorcerers. Kazuma, take action, burn those guys who dare to bully my students into ashes. Yaga clenched his fists and looked ahead anxiously. In his opinion, although Maki is now special grade, she is still far from fully adapting to her newly awakened heavenly restriction physique. Furthermore, those three are the core masters of the Zenin clan, and their cursed techniques have never been made public. Maki is likely to suffer from the loss of information. Due to my status, I am unable to offer assistance. I frowned, pinched Kazuma's sleeves and said worriedly, 3 against 1, my sister. Panda was ready to fight and said, Kung Fu Panda is ready. Kazuma shook his head and smiled. He asked, does Maki really need help? Ha! Several people turned to look at Kazuma. You mean? Boom! The giant hand made of rock suddenly exploded. Amidst the scattered rubble, Maki shot out like a bullet. Chapter 159, Maki vs. Naoya. Maki easily broke through Chojuro's curse technique. Maki was so fast that she appeared in front of Chojuro and Ranta in the blink of an eye. Swish! The blade flashed. The two cried out in pain and then retreated violently. The two men, who had each lost an arm, looked at Maki in horror. How is that possible? She was clearly trapped by Chojuro's cursed technique, but she broke free in such a short time. No, that's not it. With the incredible speed she just displayed, maybe Maki was hit on purpose. She used the rock hand as cover to launch this unexpected attack. Why? How did Maki suddenly turn into such a terrifying monster? Unfortunately for them, the bloodthirsty Maki didn't plan to give them a chance to think. Maki dodged the sword attack from Junichi in an instant and circled between Chojuro and Ranta in the blink of an eye. She quickly used her hands to lock Chojuro and Ranta's necks at the same time. The next second, Maki had pulled out the Adam's apples of both men. Chojuro and Ranta covered their empty necks with their hands, looking at Maki in horror, who remained indifferent. They wanted to speak but couldn't because they had lost their Adam's apples. Even in death, they couldn't figure out why Maki had suddenly become so powerful. As the two bodies fell helplessly, Maki placed the Adam's apples in her hand at the feet of the last person, Zenin Junichi. Then she coldly said, "It's your turn." Yaga in the distance looked at the scene in front in shock. This sudden turn of events made him widen his eyes in disbelief. The battle situation changed in an instant, causing several people to exclaim in surprise. Of the three most powerful men from the Zenin clan who had just arrived on the battlefield, 2 were killed in the blink of an eye? Everything is going according to Kazuma's expectations? Is this the unique vision of a special grade sorcerer? Maki, you've changed. You've become so strong that I can't help but feel strange about you. Junichi looked at Maki, who was walking toward him with a sword in her hand, with an extremely serious expression. At this moment just now, he seemed to see Toji's shadow in her. Could it be that she has also awakened the heavenly restriction? Facing Junichi's side, Maki simply said, "So, can you please let me have my fun?" Boom! Junichi suddenly launched an attack. Junichi performed the technique he was most proud of, missile fists. His bulging muscles exploded through his upper body, and his tank-like frame suddenly pressed forward with great force. A huge fist, like a 1,000-pound hammer, smashed down from the air. The powerful destructive force forced Maki to retreat and temporarily avoid the attack. The surrounding buildings were instantly flattened by the impact, with bricks and tiles flying everywhere. Ha ha ha. Maki, is this all you've got? Where did your momentum go? Are you enjoying yourself now? Junichi's punching speed became faster and faster, and his strength kept increasing. However, in the next second, a devilish whisper came from behind him. You think I can't kill you? Swish! The blade flashed like lightning, slicing the surrounding air in two. Junichi stood there in a daze, looking down at the bloodstain on his waist in disbelief. Then, his vision started spinning. The next second, he stared blankly at his lower body, standing there motionlessly. I was cut in half. When did she get behind me? How did I not notice at all? Now it could be confirmed, Maki had awakened the heavenly restriction. It was not until this moment that he fully realized how lucky the Zenin clan had been many years ago. The reason why the Zenin clan could clung to their false prosperity for more than a decade was simply because Toji's free-spirited nature had saved their lives. But Maki is not like Toji. Today is the death day of the Zenin clan. Maki would never let them go like Toji. Ha ha. The sins accumulated by the Zenin clan over the past 10 years will all be settled today. Looking at Maki, who was staring down at him indifferently, for the first time, he felt a little regret. Everyone in the Zenin clan was wrong. Maki, the Zenin clan didn't cherish them well. If, from the very beginning, the Zenin clan hadn't looked down on her. If no one had ridiculed Maki, if no one had treated her as a failure. Wouldn't it have been better if they had trained her instead? Junichi, blood constantly dripping from the corners of his mouth, whispered hoarsely. I'm sorry. I couldn't satisfy you. You must have had some guidance from an expert, right? Facing Junichi's final question, Maki nodded decisively. Your death is just the answer to a test to him. Answer. Junichi murmured in disbelief. Then, he completely lost his breath. The setting sun in the sky shone through the leaves, casting a glow over the Zenin clan's estate. It was like the final countdown for the Zenin clan, which had stood at the top in the world of Jujutsu for 1,000 years, but was now about to vanish. Maki's slightly thin figure seemed immensely tall under the setting sun. Suddenly, a sinister laugh echoed from behind, accompanied by slow clapping. Isn't this too cruel? Maki, do you even have any mercy left? That guy on the ground is your uncle, after all, yet you actually cut him in half? TSK, tisk. Naoya grinned grimly while clapping. But I really have to thank you for clearing the roadblocks that were in my way to becoming the clan head. As your cousin, I'm truly relieved. Facing Naoya's sarcastic words, Maki simply said, very good. The person I want to kill the most finally showed up on his own. I guess you can't wait for this moment, right? Naoya turned toward the bushes in the distance with a serious expression. Then his eyes widened. He saw Kazuma and his group slowly walking out. It's you? Naoya retreated violently as if he had seen a nightmare. The moment he saw Kazuma, Naoya subconsciously avoided looking at him. Those strange eyes. The pain imprinted deep in his soul. He never wanted to experience that feeling again. But how had they sneaked into the Zenin estate so easily? Could it be that Kazuma was planning to wipe out the Zenin clan? Kazuma smiled and said, You've got strong willpower. You didn't turn into an idiot last time. Don't be afraid. I keep my word. Your life will be taken by Maki herself. The information in the conversation between the two people stunned Maki and the others who were watching the show. From Kazuma's words, they inferred that he and Naoya had a conflict not long ago, and Kazuma had spared his life. Maki gave Kazuma a grateful look. Only by killing Naoya with her own hands can she completely resolve the knot between him and her sister. Ha ha ha. Upon hearing this, Naoya laughed out of anger. Originally he was a little worried that Kazuma would interfere in the fight between him and Maki. He didn't expect that Kazuma would actually choose to stand aside and watch. Maki, you just killed a few losers and you're trying to challenge me? You and Mai can only kneel in the distance and look at me from afar. Tisk. Maki wiped the bloodstained long sword and said impatiently, I have decided to tear your barking mouth apart first. Naoya grinned evilly. His last experience with Choso made him learn that he should never underestimate anyone. He quickly used his cursed technique. Countless pieces of transparent tape swept towards Maki. Naoya suddenly rushed towards Maki. Projection sorcery, which is said to have the best speed, allowed him to appear in front of Maki in an instant. Die! A pair of claw-like hands grabbed Maki's forehead. Chapter 160, Thrashing Projection Sorcery. The tearing of flesh that Naoya imagined did not happen. Instead, a crisp sound was heard. It was as if Naoya had steel. Naoya stepped back suddenly, feeling his entire arm go numb. He looked with slight surprise at Maki. She actually reacted? His full-speed attack, enhanced by projection sorcery, was actually blocked. Not bad. No wonder those idiots died at your hands. But do you think it's over just because you blocked the attack? Looking at the film strips surrounding him that reflected Maki's face, Naoya smiled triumphantly. Even though Maki had blocked his attack just now, she couldn't avoid projection sorcery. In other words, all the subtle movements Maki made within 1 second had already been divided into 24 equal parts. If Maki didn't follow the exact 24 frames in her next movement, she would be frozen for 1 second. This was the ultimate secret of projectile sorcery. From the moment Maki was projected onto the film, her defeat was already sealed. Naoya glanced at Kazuma and the others with a proud look. How is it? Now you realize how ridiculous your original idea was? You'll always be a hopeless case. Even with Kazuma's help, it's useless. Bang! Panda pounded the ground with both fists in frustration and said, Damn it! I can't stand this guy's face anymore. Kazuma, do something. Why are you still insisting on a one-on-one fight? Yaga and Gakaganji wore solemn expressions. They knew how terrifying projection sorcery was. Even with Maki's high degree of control over her body, it is impossible to perfectly replicate every movement without any deviation. Not to mention, Naoya was ready to strike again at any moment. At the very least, they couldn't think of any way to counter this situation. If Maki was in mortal danger, they wouldn't hesitate to intervene. But, while Naoya reveled in arrogance and the others were worried, Kazuma simply glanced at Maki and smiled lightly. As I said before, it's only right that Maki takes your life. According to the flow of events, Maki would indeed suffer a setback at this stage, caught off guard. But don't forget, she has the boost of the 8 inner gates. Does she really need to follow the rules of a mere projection sorcery? Are all Jujutsu high students a bunch of arrogant fools? Let me shatter your delusions right now. Naoya charged at Maki with blinding speed, appearing before her in an instant. Still haven't figured it out? Then go to hell and think about it. Yet, as the fatal attack neared, Maki remained motionless. She even lowered the long sword that had been guarding her body, spreading her arms wide, completely defenseless. At this moment, she was full of openings. It was as if she had resigned herself to fate. This sight made Panda's body tense in fear. Maki, what is she doing? Why drop all defenses? If Naoya strikes her in this state, the consequences will be catastrophic. However, Naoya's heart suddenly tightened. He had a bad feeling. Swish! The fatal blow of concentrated cursed energy missed Maki's head. That's right, he had hesitated. Something felt off. Even though he had always looked down on Maki since childhood, he knew her personality well. She wasn't the type to simply give up. So, at the last moment, he deliberately missed his target. There was something even more terrifying. He noticed Maki's gaze. Her expression, her eyes. There was no emotion at all. Even though her body is full of flaws, it feels like making a move means getting killed instantly, right? Kazuma's voice carried amusement from the distance. Damn it! Stop messing with me! Naoya said. Maki's indifference and Kazuma's taunts shattered Naoya's composure. The veins on his forehead bulged in rage. Naoya lunged forward again at full speed. This time, he would attack from behind and snap her neck in one go. Die! Just as Naoya's hands almost reached Maki's throat. Gate of view, open. Boom! A terrifying momentum erupted like a volcanic explosion. Green energy surged around Maki, making her hair flutter wildly. Naoya's eyes widened in horror. An instant later, he was blown away by the overwhelming force. His body smashed through a nearby building like a ragdoll. Bang! Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Maki, who had just awakened her heavenly restriction, found it difficult to sustain the sudden activation of the sixth gate. But she had successfully shattered the restraints of the projection sorcery. The sheer physical reinforcement of the sixth gate allowed her to withstand the backlash of breaking free. This shocking turn of events left the onlookers completely stunned. She actually broke free from projection sorcery's constraints? And just by her momentum alone, she sent Naoya flying? The previous one was the gate of limit, and now the gate of view. What kind of technique is this? Panda, wide-eyed, suddenly scurried behind Kazuma. Kazuma, are you recruiting? What do you think of me? Panda skillfully massaged Kazuma's shoulders. There was no doubt the technique Maki used just now must have been taught by Kazuma. If he could learn it too. Perhaps Panda could become Toji 3.0. Good technique. Kazuma narrowed his eyes, looking pleased. Seeing Panda's enthusiastic expression and the eager gazes of Yaga and Gakuganji, Kazuma smirked. Want to learn? The three nodded in unison. After you return from the culling game, I'll teach you. Hearing this, Panda's eyes gleamed, and he massaged even harder. Yaga couldn't contain his excitement either. He briefly wondered why Panda's massage skills were so refined, but in the face of such a powerful technique, that concern was irrelevant. If Kazuma teaches them the 8 inner gates, won't Jujutsu High's power level skyrocket? Kazuma simply chuckled. These guys will belong to his organization sooner or later. If they could all learn the 8 inner gates, how many warriors comparable to heavenly restriction users could be born? Ahem. Naoya staggered out of the rubble, clutching his chest. He stared at Maki in shock. How is this possible? She broke free from projection sorcery's restraints and withstood the backlash? This had never happened before. And what was that 8 inner gates technique she activated at the last moment? Was it a cursed technique? Why had he never heard of it? Just as Naoya stood frozen in confusion. Boom! A deafening explosion sounded from a distance. Naoya's eyes widened in horror. Maki had disappeared and not even an afterimage remained. His instincts kicked in and large amounts of film instantly covered his surroundings. This time, he used projection sorcery defensively. He saw the blood at the corner of Maki's lips and guessed that she couldn't maintain this form for long. If he stalls for time, he'll win. Naoya smirked sinisterly. But the next moment, Maki flashed before him. Her cold voice whispered. 24 frames per second, right? It's pretty fast. But in my current state, no one can match my speed. That wraps up this part of What If Ninja in Jujutsu Kaisen. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.